Hello, this is Amanda from Roland. I'm here with Derrick Murdock, accomplished bassist who's played for the likes of Dr. Dre, B.B. King, Natalie Cole, and on The Tonight Show with Kevin Eubanks. Thanks so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about your beginnings and how you became a bass player.
I used to listen to my father playing records all the time, and he would turn the bass up, like just mega bass, no treble, just bass, And I'd be upstairs in my room, and I can hear nothing but bass all the time. So that's what kind of drew me into, wanting to play bass. I mean, he would play all these R&B records, James Brown and, Kool and the Gang and all that stuff. And so I heard, all these bass lines in my head. So, when I finally got a bass, when I was about 11, it was kind of easy for me to start learning the bass lines because I kind of had them in my head, It was kind of real easy to figure out, And then I started hanging with some friends, and they kind of got me into Jimi Hendrix. They kind of got me into rock, And so I kind of grew up listening to R&B and rock,
Very cool. You grew up in Philadelphia?
Yeah, West Philadelphia, yeah.
Was that music scene, did that influence you as well, or did you play with some people in that area?
Well, not until later. I played with a couple of R&B artists, a guy by the name of Miles J. And then I hooked up with a guy named Michael Pedersen Jr., who was he's a sax player, and he was doing a lot of sessions at Philadelphia International. And, I used to listen to his band a lot. He had a fusion band. And I kind of hooked up with him later. He had a drummer named Darryl Brown who used to play with Stanley Clarke. He's a doctor now. He turned me on to a lot of fusion music, back then. Mm-hmm. So I got into the fusion thing later on.
When was the moment or the time where you decided, to make it your career, life's become a pro?
Actually, pretty late in life, not until 17. I started out, playing a little bit, and then I kind of put it down and got into football, hanging out in the street and all that kind of stuff. And then later on, when I moved to Willow Grove, which is on the outskirts of Philadelphia, I met a guy by the name of Tommy Campbell and Tony Smith. Tony Smith being the bass player, Tommy Campbell being the drummer. They actually got me into wanting to play it full time. Those guys are incredible.
How does the VB-99 fit into the various musical styles and performances that you do playing bass?
Oh, man. It allows me to come up with different sounds that I like. There's one sound that I really like. There's the Music Man simulation. And I used to kid around with a friend of mine. I was playing Fender Jazz at the time, and I was like, oh, man, I wish I can wish I had a knob that I can push to make my Fender Jazz turn into a Music Man sound. And we used to joke about that all the time. And then, Roland finally came out with that. I was like, oh, man, this is it right there. This is it. I really enjoy pulling that up at times when we're playing some tunes. So a lot of times Kevin likes to play some jams. He'll just start, playing something, and you got to hear what it is and all that, and then you got to jump in. I would always turn this Music Man sound on, and he would like that, So this is one of my favorite ones on here.
What advantages do you find using the VB-99?
Easy access, to the sounds. I really love that. I really love this feature here, which allows me to access the sounds really quickly. That's the main thing for me.
Other than the Roland VB-99, are there any other Roland and Boss products that you use?
Yeah, I like the GT10B and the RC20XL. I love that a lot.
Very nice.
Yeah, I have fun with those.
So who are some of your musical influences?
James Brown, Jimi Hendrix, Cool from Cool and the Gang, you know. Who else? Oh, I later got into like Jocko, Stanley Clark, upright players, Niels, Orsted Pedersen. I kind of got into a lot of bass players. And, you know, as I, started getting older and started listening to different types of music, I was just always listening to the bass players. Some of them I didn't even know who they were, you know. I just liked the way they played.
So I'm curious, when you listen to a record usually, or a song, do you listen to the bass more than anything else?
In the early days, yes, that's all I would listen to was the bass, you know. And then later on, after talking to, a couple of people, they got me into like listening to like horn parts and keyboard parts, guitar parts, and all that kind of stuff. When I started playing bass like full time, I started playing in clubs, around the Philadelphia area. And then later I moved to Atlantic City, where there was a lot of casinos and stuff like that. And at the time, there was like a lot of work there for musicians. Mm-hmm. So everybody would flock there from Philadelphia, New York, all over to like, work in these casinos and stuff like that. And that was kind of good for me because it kind of helped me to play all different types of music, because that's, what they had going on down there. They had like Dixieland bands down there, R&B bands, rock bands, Latin bands and stuff like that. So that was like a fun time for me because I got a chance to play all different types of music.
So you toured with different groups around the area, the Atlantic City
area?
Actually,
I wasn't touring there. I was just working around town, playing in the small clubs. And then when I went to Atlantic City, I started playing in all those casinos there, the Sands, Taj Mahal, all those casinos they had down there, resorts. It was just a fun time. I didn't start really touring until I moved to I moved to New York for a little bit, and I got a chance to work with some R&B artists. I had this job working on the Spirit of New York boat, which was a real cool gig, and that gig was cool because they allowed me to sub out all the time. So whenever I got a gig with this guy Miles, they would let me sub it out, which was really cool,
Did you have a favorite gig or group you worked with in Atlantic City?
Yeah, there were a couple of them actually. One girl, I think her name was Joanne Sansom. She was like a jazz singer, but she did like a lot of fusion stuff too. And they would allow us to play like 2 fusion tunes, before she came on. And so we would play like some Weather Report and all that good stuff.
What was your experience like working on The Tonight Show?
Oh man, scary at first. Scary at first, because when I first found out I was going to be doing it, I was thinking about that. I'm like, okay, I got the gig. I was real happy and everything. And I thought about it. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to be playing with Marvin Smitty Smith, and Kevin Eubanks and Jerry Atkins, who played with Billy Cobham, and all these great musicians. So it was a little scary at first, but actually, when I got there and they were real nice to me and real patient, and they made me feel real comfortable.
What was, do you think, the trickiest thing about playing bass for The Tonight Show?
Just having all my sensibilities, Sometimes, well, a lot of times Kevin would play like a line and I would have to follow him, and I only had like seconds to like learn the line. So that was kind of scary to me, But after a while, it was like second nature.
Do you have a favorite Jay Leno story?
I do actually. There's this place called Philly's Best. It's a cheesesteak place in Burbank. So I was there eating one night. It was about 8 o'clock. And Jay comes rolling up with his assistant. I guess he was just coming from his garage where he works on his cars and stuff. And so he comes in and he teases me because, at the time I was on a diet. And so when he pulled up, he seen me doing like this, mouth wide open with the cheesesteak, and he's like laughing at me. And so he comes in, he sits down, and so we were talking, and he orders a cheesesteak with double meat, right? And I'm like, wow, double meat. He's gonna tear this thing up. So he starts to eat it, and he like inhaled the thing. I'm like looking at him, I couldn't believe it, right? He just inhaled it. And then he ordered another one. I was only like halfway done with my little steak. He orders another one and inhales that one, and I was just like, I can't believe you just did that. He just laughed at me.
What would you say is your number one thought when you go on stage for a performance?
Well, first thing I do is just try to get rid of the nervousness, because I'm always a little nervous when I go up there. And then just make sure I have all my sensibilities, make sure I'm, just ready to go.
You've worked with artists such as Dr. Dre, BB King, Chuck Berry, Peter Frampton, Michael Bolton, Aaron Neville, and Natalie Cole. Is there anyone else you would want to work with?
Sting. I love Sting. I always wanted to play with him. Yeah, he's just one of them. I mean, there's a bunch of people, but mainly Sting.
So Tonight Show obviously has gone through a lot of transitions recently. What are you working on currently?
I was doing a bunch of sessions for a while, and now that I have a bunch of time, I'm thinking about doing a CD, kind of like an R&B one, and I want to do like a fusion one. I've always wanted to do a fusion CD. So I have a couple of tunes. I have about 4 tunes that I have already.
What would you say is the biggest change that evolving guitar technology has made to the way you play bass?
I've always been able to adapt to that, but I remember when, there was a time where I only played 4-string, right? Well, a lot of people played 4-string at the time, and then, they came out with the synthesizers back then. That kind of put bass players out of work for a minute. And so that's when they came out with the 5 strings and stuff like that. And so that was kind of weird for me, because it took me a while to get adjusted to playing 5-string.
What would you say to up-and-coming bass players who are trying to make their way in the music business?
Yeah, just keep an open mind about the music. Always keep an open mind about it, and have a great attitude, plain and simple.